Okay, good talk. Sorry about that. Okay, so before we start again, we're learning Lila Nishmas Yehuda Shimon Zechron Racha Ben Yeshua Yasef Moshe and Hayalev Zechron Racha Ben Yeshua Adam Zalman Moshe Nisham Zalman Aliyah. Okay, so last week we basically started discussing the cooking, all the cooking shilas that come up, making tea, etc., etc. So I think that's where we'll start off with the common questions that come up when either making tea on Shabbos, serving cholent. I don't know how much we'll get to tonight, but we'll start with the ones that are most practical. If anybody has any suggestions of what we should discuss, then of course just put it on the chat, and we'll discuss it. So basically, let's just start with the basic understanding of Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi, and that's it's confusing. To be honest with you, I get confused myself. That's not a chiddush that I get confused, but every time I just relearn it and say, okay, how does it work now? Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi. But again, like with anything else in halacha, if we understand the basics of it, then we can have a better and different understanding of where the halacha is coming from. So very quickly and very simply, there's Kli Rishon, there's Kli Sheni, and Kli Shlishi. Kli Rishon is the initial pot that was cooking on the fire, meaning when you have a pot of soup sitting on a fire, that is called a Kli Rishon. But not only is it a Kli Rishon when it's on the fire, it's a Kli Rishon when you take it off of the fire too. Right? So you have a soup on the fire, you take it off, it is still a Kli Rishon. The halachas of a Kli Rishon are very clear. You cannot put anything into a Kli Rishon unless it was pre-cooked. Nothing goes into a Kli Rishon. A Kli Rishon can cook, even if it's not on the fire. So therefore, you take a soup and you want to add something that was never cooked into the soup, you can't do it because it's in its original Kli. Now, I should have said this before, but we're of course talking about where the contents of the pot are hot. If the contents of the soup pot are not hot, then obviously you can put whatever you want into it. Our definition of hot is basically 108 to 110 degrees. That's our definition of hot. Although there are opinions that say hot could be 160 degrees. So it varies. It goes from anywhere from 110, 108, 110 to 160. So we're machmer both ways, obviously, because we're talking about Shabbos and we're talking about cooking, which could be an issur from the Torah. Anytime we have a concern for an issur from the Torah, then we try and go with the more strict opinions. So the strict opinion would tell us that anything above 108 to 110 degrees is going to be considered cooking. But that's only when it's in a Kli Rishon. That's only when it's in the initial pot. Okay? So, for example, if you want to take salt and add it to your soup, the only way you can do that is if the salt is already cooked. I'm not so sure. If salt is cooked, I guess there's different salts, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to try and find out with whether your salt is cooked. If your salt is cooked, then you're allowed to put it into the soup in the Kli Rishon. Not when it's on the fire, though. You can't do anything when it's on the actual fire. But after it comes off the fire, you can take it. You can put the salt in there, and then that's okay if it was pre-cooked. Sugar, these type of things, you would be able to. I don't know why anybody would put sugar in a soup, but I guess it depends what type of soup. But you can put, let's say, cholent. Once the pot comes off the fire, as long as the item that you're putting in there was pre-cooked, you can put it into a Kli Rishon. Anything that was not pre-cooked cannot be put into a Kli Rishon, right? Which, for just an example that comes up a lot, is can you take, if you had a pot and you took it of hot water on the fire, and you put it into, and you took the pot off the fire, and you're going to take that and you're going to make tea. So can you put a lemon into the tea? not lemon juice, which we'll get to that soon. We'll review this, but just as an example, you take a pot off the fire, hot water. You want to put lemon directly into that pot. You cannot do that because the lemon was never cooked, and it will get cooked in that utensil because it's a kli rishon. Okay, so it's very straightforward. Kli rishon cooks, so therefore you cannot put anything that was not pre-cooked. The reason why you're allowed to put something that was pre-cooked into a kli rishon is because we know the rule is ein bishul achar bishul, right? There's no cooking after cooking. So since it was cooked already, therefore there's no issur of cooking it. So therefore you can put it into the kli rishon as long as the kli rishon is not on the fire. If it's on the fire, it's not usur because of bishul. It's also midrabanan that you're not allowed to add food onto a fire without a blech. So therefore you're not allowed to put in. You're not allowed to put in the food when it's even if there is a blech, when it's on the fire, you're not allowed to put in the food. So therefore, no putting food into any kli rishon that's on the fire. When it's off the fire, if it's pre-cooked, you could put it in there. If it's not pre-cooked, you cannot put it in there. That's kli rishon. Okay, I hope that's clear. If anybody has any questions or wants me to review it, we'll review it again. But just post that. Kli sheni really is a big disagreement at the poskim if a kli sheni could cook. This actually comes up for Hilchos Shabbos, and this also comes up for kashrus, right? Meaning if you added cheese to food that's in a kli sheni, then it's obviously a problem. But if you added it to after a kli sheni, then it's going to be less of a problem. And even in a kli sheni, it's a big machlokes whether that actually cooks. The food is going to be a problem because you added cheese to meat. But what about the pot, right? Because of the pot that you cooked it in, let's say it was a bowl, and that bowl was a kli sheni, then if you say that kli sheni doesn't cook, then the bowl is going to be fine because it wasn't cooked. But lemaisa, bottom line is we are machmer for kli sheni, that it does cook, but it's a chumrah. So it's important to know that it's a chumrah because sometimes you may ask a shayla, and they may say with a kli sheni and if you mix together with other leniencies, you might get a heta. So it's important when you ask a question about kashrus or on Hilchos Shabbos, it's very important that you specify that it was in a kli sheni or a kli shlishi or a kli rishon. Okay, so again, a kli sheni, really the way we paskin a kli sheni cannot cook regular foods, but kalei habishul, things that cook easily, can be cooked in a kli sheni. Right? So like eggs and tea and that type of thing can be cooked in a kli sheni. Things that are definitely not easily cooked, cannot be cooked in a kli sheni. Right? So that's water and oil. Those are two basic examples of things that will definitely not be cooked in a kli sheni. So oil and water definitely can be added to a kli sheni, but all other foods we don't put into a kli sheni. Okay, so again, let's say you have spices. So you want to add spices to the soup or salt. So if it's in a kli sheni, it's, again, if your salt is already pre-cooked, it's not a problem. If it's not pre-cooked, then it's preferable not to do it until you get into a kli shlishi, right? So again, kli sheni can only cook easily cooked foods, which we really don't know about which foods can easily cook or not. We only know water and oil and a couple other foods that are not easily cooked. Otherwise, everything else we have to be concerned that maybe it's easily cooked. So we don't lechatchila put into a kli sheni. Something that's pre-cooked liquids, right, that are cold now, can definitely be put into a kli sheni, right? So again, kli sheni, we try to be machmer, but it's important to know that it's a chumrah, and we don't try not to add things into a kli sheni. If you did, it's not going to make it usher, that's for sure. I'm not sure what you're asking. It's also midrabanan. What is somebody asking that? What do you mean by it's also midrabanan? The Kli Sheni is certainly a D'Rabbanan. Kli Rishon is really from the Torah. When it's not on the fire, it's probably not in a Torah. But yeah. No, pre-cooked solids definitely can go into it. The pre-cooked solids can even go into a Kli Rishon. So definitely can go into a Kli Sheni. All right, there's a machlokes. I should have been made a little clearer. There's a machlokes whether pre-cooked liquids, once they get cold, can be heated up, even in a Kli Rishon. So we wouldn't put it into a Kli Rishon if it's cooled down. But on a Kli Sheni, you most certainly can put cooled off liquids into a Kli Sheni. Okay, so again, that's Kli Rishon. We don't put anything into. Unless it's off the fire. Kli Sheni, you can't. Again, it's a chumrah. Kli Shlishi is where the big issue comes in. Kli Shlishi cannot cook. We paskin that Kli Shlishi cannot cook. So really, Me'ikar Adin, you could add anything, and we'll get to the ladle in a few minutes. Kli Shlishi really cannot cook anything. However, there's a machlokes if it could cook kalei habishal. Easily cooked things maybe can be cooked in a Kli Shlishi, and most paskin like that. So tea leaves are easily cooked. And what else is the one that comes up the most? Coffee. Ground coffee can be easily cooked. So according to the Mishnah Brura, Chazon Ish, you should not be cooking even tea in a Kli Shlishi. Rav Moshe Feinstein held that tea is not Kali Abishal, and you are allowed to cook tea in a Kli Shlishi. Right? It's a big leniency. Many in America go with that leniency. Right? So that's a big machlokes, and we'll get back to it. But again, let's understand. Kli Shlishi Me'ikar Adin cannot cook anything, but some say that we have to be concerned that kalei habishal, anything that gets easily cooked, like tea leaves, then many hold that you cannot cook that, which is why they make what they call tea sense or tea essence or whatever it is, right? That's why they do that, which is basically taking tea and putting a lot of tea bags into water, keeping the water warm over Shabbos. And then if you want to, and that makes it very concentrated, and then you take it and you add it to water, and then you have your tea on Shabbos. That's the way a lot of Klal Yisrael makes their tea. But according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, you don't have to do that. You can just make your tea in the regular way on Shabbos. Okay, now we'll get back to the practical of all this. But again, just to review, there's Kli Rishon, there's Kli Sheni, there's Kli Shlishi. Kli Rishon cooks, even when it's not on the fire. Therefore, nothing should be put into a Kli Rishon unless it was already pre-cooked. Kli Sheni really is a big machlokes whether it can cook, it can't cook. It really, according to halacha, is it cannot cook foods, regular foods, but it can cook easily cooked foods. We don't know. We don't know what's defined as easily cooked, not easily cooked. So therefore, we're machmir not to put foods into a Kli Sheni, right? And Kli Shlishi can't cook at all, so you're allowed to put most foods into a Kli Shlishi. Things that get cooked very easy, which is basically the most practical, is tea leaves, and maybe brewed coffee. Those two are very easily cooked, so therefore you don't put that into a Kli Shlishi. Other than that, you can put anything into a Kli Shlishi. So now, somebody asked about the ladle. So now let's go through, I'm sorry, before that. Let's go through what is Kli Rishon, what are the practical examples, Kli Rishon, Kli Sheni, Kli Shlishi. So let's go with a soup. So you take the soup pot, that's a Kli Rishon. Then you take that soup pot and you put it into a bowl, right? So if you pour from the soup pot into a bowl, so then that bowl is a Kli Sheni, okay? Can you dip challah into that? Can you dip croutons into that? right? Because again, we're using the example of pouring on purpose, right? So now you're taking from the soup and you're pouring it into a bowl. So now that bowl is a klisheni. What can and cannot be added to that? So again, the rule with klisheni is we are machmer that you shouldn't put any uncooked foods into a klisheni, right? So now, what would be some classic examples of what you would add into a klisheni? So first thing is spices, right? So if the spices were never cooked, so then you should not put spices into your soup. If your salt was never cooked, you should not put salt into your soup if it's in a klisheni, right? Because we have to be concerned that it's going to recook it. What about dipping challah into a klisheni, right? So now really you shouldn't, because challah is only baked and not cooked. So therefore we look at it as it was never cooked. So you should not dip challah into your klisheni, right? We'll get back to how, well, in most cases you can. Bottom line is you can dip the challah in, but if you pour the soup from the pot into the klisheni, then you should not dip your challah into it. Croutons, what about croutons? See, the croutons is interesting. Depends how they make the croutons. If the croutons were fried, then that's already pre-cooked. So since it was already pre-cooked, we know it's ein bishul achar bishul, and then you're allowed to put the croutons. Not only would you be allowed to put the croutons into the klisheni, you'd even be allowed to put the croutons into a kli rishon, right? Because they were already pre-cooked. So that's klisheni. Right? That would be if you do it that way. However, the way most people, I think, serve the soup is with a ladle, right? So now the question is, you have the kli rishon, which is the soup. Then you take the ladle and you put it into the soup. Now you take that, and then you take that ladle and put it into the bowl. Is the bowl a klisheni or a klishlishi? Meaning, what's the status of a ladle? It is very important, because if the status of a ladle is that it's its own utensil, which seemingly it is, then the bowl that you're putting it into is a klishlishi, and you could add whatever you want into it, except for let's say tea leaves, right? Which we'll get to. Well, but again, if you guys, excuse me, I'm sorry. Is there a reason why you're in this room?
Yeah, but my thing leaves the church.
I'm sorry. Okay, so now if you say that the ladle is if the ladle is a klisheni, and then the bowl is a klishlishi. If you say that the ladle is not a klisheni, so then what's in the bowl is a klisheni, right? So therefore, that's going to depend on that machlokes. So basically, the way we paskin is, if you leave the ladle sitting in the soup till the ladle gets hot, then it's for sure not going to be a klisheni. But if you just stick the ladle in and quickly put it into the other soup, then we're going to say that it is a klisheni, and then what's in the bowl is a klishlishi, and then you're going to be okay to put pretty much whatever you want into the bowl. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now, so now, basically, if you want to put challah into the soup, or crumbs, like somebody just posted, you want to put crumb, if you have challah crumbs in the soup, then you have to make sure they're not there. So the bottom line is since the ladle is a klisheni, right? If you don't leave it in there, then challah is baked. There's a machlokes whether if something, remember we said before that ein bishul achar bishul, there's no cooking after cooking, right? But the question is there cooking after baking? That's a machlokes. Because bottom line is, again, the difference between baking and cooking is with water, baking is without water. I mean, there's water in it, but it's more solid, right? So therefore it's a machlokes. Now, kli shlishi and the ladle is also machlokes. So therefore, once you put the soup into the bowl, then you can definitely add challah because there's two machlokes. A, whether challah is considered pre-cooked. B, is whether the ladle is considered a klisheni. So between the two, we're going to be lenient. And we say that you can dip challah or croutons that were baked or noodles or anything like that. You can most definitely put it into, well, noodles is for sure cooked. I'm sorry, that was a bad example. Noodles is for sure cooked, so that you can even put into a klisheni. So then we're going to be makel that you could do that, right? So that is the status of the ladle. So that's your kli rishon, your kli sheni, and your kli shlishi, right? Okay, let me see some questions here. A kli sheni, you could have pre-cooked solids and pre-cooked liquids can go into a kli sheni because they're both pre-cooked. Okay, then if you have a thick soup, like a pea soup, and then you take off the plate, the plata, can you mix it and stir up the thicker part into the thinner part to make it one thickness? That's not a shiloh of bishul, that's a shiloh of lush, of kneading. I would say that you could do that because it's all part of one thing, and things separated. Okay, the instant Starbucks packets. Okay, we're going to get back to that. Does the bowl need to be crumb free before putting soup in? It's preferable to be crumb free because even if you use just the ladle, that would be pouring a ladle. That's a kli. If you're assuming that a ladle is klisheni, then it wouldn't be a problem because you're pouring from a klisheni. But some hold that the ladle is a kli rishon, so you're pouring from a kli rishon on top of crumbs. So I would say it's better not to have the crumbs in there. I don't think you have to make yourself crazy, right? We're talking about if the ladle is metal. If the ladle is plastic, that's going to be even more lenient because plastic does not conduct heat. But from what I understand, most ladles have some metal, even if the bottom has some plastic on it, but it's metal inside that. So we're talking about a metal. We're talking about a metal ladle. Plastic ladle would be more lenient because again, plastic does not conduct heat. Okay, so that's the kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. Okay, so now let's discuss some more practical things, which is the major one is what's the story with making tea on Shabbos. So we said that a kli shlishi is doesn't cook, but we said most poskim say that tea is called kali abishal and it cooks even in a kli shlishi. Ramosha Feinstein held it does not cook in a kli shlishi. Ramosha Feinstein was the leading posik in the world, but for America, so definitely for America, so many rely on that. And if you see somebody making a regular tea on Shabbos in their house in a kli shlishi, it is not a problem. You don't have to go crazy, and you could drink the tea. And I personally tell people, if they know they're going to have tea on Shabbos, use tea essence. But if they did not, this is what I say, and I hope it's not a little confusing. But what I tell people to do is as follows: take the tea and put it into a cup, and then into another cup, and then let it sit for a minute or two so that it cools down, or pour it back and forth from one cup to another cup until it cools down a little bit. And personally, I would say once it gets under 160 degrees, which obviously you're not going to have a thermometer on Shabbos, but once you do it back and forth and let it sit for a minute or two, it's not going to be 160 degrees. And then for the kali abishal, we can assume that under 160 is not considered cooking anymore. That's considered cold, and you'd be able to add the tea bags or tea leaves into the water. I mean, basically, it's using a combination. It's using a combination of leniencies, but that's what I do. Again, if you know you're a tea drinker, then why get into the question? Just make the tea essence before Shabbos, and then you're fine. If you can't, or you didn't, or you need more tea, so then take the tea, put it into the cups, pour it back and forth a few times, let it sit for 2 minutes. That will drop the temperature. I don't know for sure. I'm assuming it'll drop the temperature to 140 degrees, 150 degrees, which many places can say is considered not hot. And you, between that and that, Moshe Feinstein holds it, you can put the tea bags in there, even if it's hot. If it's a kli shlishi, it's fine according to Moshe. Between two of them, you could do it. And that would be the same thing with making brewed tea, which is also easily cooked. There's another issue I see somebody asked, and that's the issue of butter on the tea bag. Why is that butter? Because the tea is inside the bag, and then when you pull up the bag, you're removing the bad, which is the tea leaves, from the good. We know butter, you cannot remove the bad from the good. So you're removing the tea leaves from the soup. So the eitzah for that is either A, leave the bag in there while you drink the tea, and then that's not a problem, or you can take the tea bag out with a spoon, and the spoon will have a little bit of tea together with the tea bag, and therefore that's removing bad and good from good, which is okay, according to most places. So again, if you for the butter issue, what you do is you take out the tea bag with a spoon under it, and then some of the tea is in the spoon, and that means that you remove the good and the bad from the good, and therefore you're okay. You're okay with that. Okay. Fine. Yes, can you add more hot water to tea bags? You most definitely can, because that's already going to be considered cooked. So you could add hot water, but obviously use a kli shlishi. Use a kli shlishi for that. Okay, now getting back to, I see somebody asked, yeah, okay, so then I see you want me to repeat about anything that's baked can be put into a kli shlishi when you use the ladle. So challah or baked croutons or whatever, anything that would be baked can be put into a soup that is that's a kli shlishi when it be used with a ladle. Okay, now I think somebody asked this, but what happens if there's moisture in the cups? Right, a lot of times people will use the same cup as the kli, like they leave a cup on the next to the urn, so that you can just use that cup, and that becomes the kli sheni, and then you pour it into another cup, and that's a kli shlishi. The problem is that there's cold water in the cup. So is that called cooking? Is that called cooking the cold water? So it goes. That's another machlokes, whether drink, liquid that was cooked, that got cold, is that called, do we say ein bishul acha bishul on that or not? So that's really a machlokes between the Sfardim and Ashkenazim. For the Sfardim, it's not a problem. Ashkenazim are strict, and they say if it's cold water, then it has the problems of recooking. So according to Ashkenazim, if you see actual water in that cup and you want to put hot water into that cup, you should not do that. What you should do is just turn it over and shake it out. The little, you don't have to take a towel and dry out the cup and make sure that there's no moisture there. That you don't have to do. You just if there's big drops, then get rid of that. But once you shake it out, and then there's only little moisture in there, then that's fine. You don't have to worry about that. Right? I hope I'm being clear, because a lot of people think that they have to take the cup and then they have to dry it, and they're using napkins and they're making themselves crazy. You don't have to make yourself crazy. It's even just not putting the water in there when there's actual leftover water is a chumrah, right? So therefore, the actual water, get rid of. But it's a machlokes. Why should you get into the machlokes? But you don't have to make yourself crazy for the little moisture that's left in the cup, little residue of moisture. Then you don't have to. You don't have to do that, right? So that's the same thing when you're taking with a ladle, and you put the ladle into the kli rishon. So if you're doing it, you're serving multiple times, so the leftover liquid that's on the ladle is not going to be a problem because it's still warm. When it's warm, there's for sure no bishul achar bishul. right? But even if you left it for a while, so then just turn it over and shake it, and then you don't have to perfectly dry it, right? If there's cholent on a ladle, that's for sure not a problem because that's considered a cooked salad, and a cooked salad for sure does not have another bishul after it. Yeah. Okay. So then that's that. Yeah. So I hope that's clear. I hope we answered. Hope we answer that. Can you use your hands as a kli shlishi? I mean, your hand, it's going to be hot. Somebody's asking if you could put your hands as a kli shlishi. Then no crumbs. No, the kli shlishi has to be on the soup, not on the crumbs. So yeah, you have to use a utensil in order to make the kli shlishi. But theoretically, if you have a high tolerance for heat, or you're wearing gloves and you want to serve the soup using your hands, then you could do that. Right? Oh, so cholent with salad. So putting a cholent on the plate together with other liquids is not preferable, especially since the liquid that's inside a salad was not pre-cooked. So then that would be a problem. So you should preferably, again, it's a chumrah because by the time the cholent gets to the way I think most people do it is that they take the cholent, then they take a ladle, put it into a serving bowl, bring the serving bowl to the table, and then it goes onto a plate. So therefore, by the time it gets to people, it's already on a kli revi, kli chamishi. So whether it cooks is a big chumrah. So try not to have liquid there. But if it's there, it's not a problem. It's not a problem, right? Okay, so then that's with making tea. Can you add a lemon to the kli shlishi? So a lemon you could add to the kli shlishi. What about lemon juice? So lemon juice could be added because lemon juice is cooked, right? Lemon juice is already pre-cooked, so there's no problem adding lemon juice, even really to a kli sheni, certainly to a kli shlishi, right? Well, real lemon. I'm sorry, if it's a real lemon that's raw, so then really it's preferable. Not to, well, in a kli shlishi, you'd be able to be mekel. Another thing that people are not aware of, you cannot squeeze a lemon into the tea, right? Squeezing out the lemon juice into a tea is not allowed. You can only squeeze lemon is a solid. When you squeeze the lemon juice coming out as a liquid, and that's considered like squeezing. It's no different than squeezing out a shmata or clothing from water, which you're not allowed to do. So that's the same thing by a lemon. You can squeeze a lemon onto a solid because that liquid is going from a solid to a solid. So then that's okay. So like squeezing a lemon on top of salmon would be allowed on Shabbos because it's going from a solid, which is the lemon, to a solid, which is the salmon, even though it's a liquid in between, but we don't have a problem with it because it's going from a solid to a solid. But squeezing a solid to make it into a liquid is a problem. So therefore, you cannot squeeze your tea, your lemon into the tea. If you want to be able to do that, so what the poskim say to do, most poskim say what you can do is if you're putting sugar into your tea, so then you squeeze the lemon onto the sugar because the sugar is a solid. So then it's going from a solid to a solid, and then you put it into the tea, right? Then that would be okay. Right? Same thing, you cannot take, yes, you can squeeze a lemon onto a salad because again, that's a solid going into a solid, right? You also can't take a slice of lemon, put it into a tea, and then push the side of the lemon against the tea, against the glass of the tea or the side of the cup, because that's also squeezing it out, right? So again, just to repeat. Squeezing a lemon onto liquid is not allowed, and this goes for any fruit. Squeezing it onto liquid is not allowed. Squeezing it onto a solid is allowed. So a salad is considered a solid, and so sugar is considered a solid. So then you would be able to do that, right? Fine. So Again, continuing on what you're allowed to do once it's in a kli shlishi. So like we said, if it's a soup, you could add croutons, you could put in challah. If it's a tea or a coffee, you can put cake, you could put cookies. That's also okay. Sugar is pre-cooked, so you could add sugar. You could even add sugar into a kli sheni. That's not an issue. These same things apply to coffee. However, coffee is a little bit more. Coffee is a little bit more lenient, because if you're having instant coffee is already cooked. Right, so your plain taster's choice instant coffee is considered pre-cooked. So since it's pre-cooked, so therefore you could add it even to a kli sheni. Really, it could even be added to a kli rishon, but it's better not to do that. I see somebody asking about hot cocoa. Hot cocoa, from what I understand, is already pre-cooked, so you'd be able to add that even into a kli sheni. You want to be safe, do it into a kli shlishi. Right? Some places can say just always do everything to a kli shlishi, which is not a big deal, because like this you're safe. But I'm assuming hot cocoa is already pre-cooked. If you find out that it's not pre-cooked, then then you'd have to use the kli shlishi. But regular instant coffee is already cooked, so you don't even need a kli shlishi, and you could even put into a kli sheni. Many just put into a kli shlishi because they're machmer, but that's fine. Brewed coffee is not like that. Brewed coffee is not cooked. Which we'll get to. I see we're running out of time, but we'll get to that. We'll get to the brewed coffee in a minute. So now here's a question that comes up a lot, and many people think it's asur, and the majority of poskim allow it. What's with making a tradition soup? I don't know why tradition gets the name of it, but tradition, I guess, is the original company. But any of these noodle soups that people like to have, can you make that on Shabbos? The answer is most poskim say it's 100% allowed to make it on Shabbos, because those noodles are pre-cooked. And since they're pre-cooked, you don't even need a kli shlishi in order to make the soup, and then it's okay. If you want to be safe in case they weren't cooked, so use a kli shlishi. I tell people if they want to make the soup, use a kli shlishi. Well, why not? It's not too difficult. Not too difficult to use a kli shlishi, and you do that. The only problem is those little packets of spices that come along with it. So that can be, the spices can be a little bit of an issue because they may not be cooked. So then in that case, put it into a kli shlishi, and then like we said, wait a couple of minutes till it cools down, then you'd be able to put the spices in there, right? So therefore, it would be allowed. Instant oatmeal, I see somebody posted instant oatmeal. I think from what I understand, it's pre-cooked. Since it's pre-cooked, you would be allowed to make it even in a kli sheni. If it's not pre-cooked, then you could use a kli shlishi and then wait, like we said, wait for it to cool down a little bit, and then you can make the instant oatmeal in a kli shlishi. Instant oatmeal has a different issue with what we said before with lush. So because you're making it into a salad, so there you have to make it with two shinuyim. Meaning, if you normally add the water to the oatmeal, then add the oatmeal to the water, or vice versa. Do it in a different way than you normally do it during the week. When you mix it a different way. So, meaning if you normally mix in a circular motion, which is I think the way most people do it, so then you do it in a up and down motion instead of a circular motion, right? Fine. So that's that. Yeah. So again, the tradition soups. Just trying to cover everything before we stop. So the tradition soups you can do, and the tea we've covered. The second shinui is to mix it in a different way. When you're doing the oatmeal, mix it if you don't mix it, if you normally mix it in circular motion, then mix it in an up and down motion. Right? And the first shinoi is if you normally would add water to the oatmeal, then put the water into the bowl and add the oatmeal into the water. Right? That would be, and if you do the opposite, then just do the opposite than when you do it during the week. Okay. Pour over coffee. I don't know if anybody's into that. I personally don't drink coffee, so I don't know much about all these things, but it's a question that gets asked a lot. The pour over coffee is when you have like, it's brewed coffee and you have like this plastic that you put over your coffee cup, and then you put a filter into the cup with coffee grinds, and then you pour hot water over those coffee grinds, then it filters into the cup, and it's supposed to be like a brewed coffee. So can you make that on Shabbos? So you would definitely need to use a kli shlishi, because those coffee grinds, if that's the right word, the kernel, I don't know, whatever it is that they're called, are not pre-cooked. So therefore you would need to use a kli shlishi. And since we're concerned that it's kali abishul, I would say that let it cool down for a minute or two, or pour it back and forth till it cools down, and then you could pour it through there. Now the confusion is butter. Many people think it's butter because you put the coffee into the filter, then you pour the water over the filter, and then it goes down into the coffee. It is not butter. The reason why it's not butter is because the coffee is already in the filter before you poured the water. So basically what it is, it's when you poured water and it came out brown water, I'm assuming that's the color of your coffee, it came out brown water. So when in water, came out water, just had a color, and it was never really a mixture. It went right in, went right out. Where it would be butter is if you had like a Turkish coffee, you made a coffee that had, and then you had the coffee grinds all over the coffee, and you wanted to filter that out. If you pour that over a filter, then that would be butter, because there was a mixture when it was in the coffee, and then the filter held it back, sort of like you said with the tea bag. But here, when you make a pour over coffee, it was never a mixture, because, I mean, it was a mixture, but for a fraction of a second as the coffee went through the filter. All right, so again, the basic difference is it's butter if it's a mixture of the water together with the coffee, and then you poured it through a filter. When the brewed coffee is not like that. You take the coffee and you leave it in the filter, and then you pour the water through that, and that's not a problem of butter. Dyeing, we don't say, there's no dyeing of food. We paskin that you're not. It's a chumrah. Which way to make the coffee? That's a big chumrah. So we really paskin that there's no tzviya ba'oichlin, there's no dyeing by food. So therefore you don't have to worry about that. You do not have to reverse the order of when you make coffees and putting in sugar. You do not have to reverse the order. The only reason why you have to reverse the order by making oatmeal is because it's lush, because it's you're taking something liquidy and making it into a solid mass. In which case you need two shinas. Making coffee with sugar, there's nothing solid; it's all liquid, so that's not a problem. Okay, so that's basically that. I see that a couple other questions that don't have to do with this. Maybe we'll discuss it for a couple of minutes. If you have cooked garlic and oil dip, can I put it on the plata right before I light the warm up on Shabbos? Yeah, I don't see, if you put it on before Shabbos, I don't see what the problem is. And many people use a plata. If it's not adjustable, they use that plata to even take food out of the refrigerator and put it onto the plata on Shabbos. If you're lenient like that, then this certainly is not a problem. Right? That's that's that. Now you asked about what did you ask about? Teeth. Okay. All right, if anybody wants to log off, I guess you could log off, but yeah, I should have probably discussed before getting into cooking, should have finished with the for the body things that have to do with the body, like we discussed last week, the makeup, etc., etc. Okay, so brushing teeth on Shabbos is a very interesting din, because seemingly there's no problem of squeezing a toothbrush because it's plastic bristles that are not absorbent. But Ramesh Feinstein said, since those bristles on the toothbrush are so close together, therefore it's similar to squeezing when you make the toothbrush wet and then you put it into your teeth and the water goes out onto your teeth. So then it's similar to squeezing, which is not allowed on Shabbos. There are many that disagree with Rav Moshe Feinstein on that and do allow brushing teeth on Shabbos. So one issue is the squeezing out. The other one is that you take toothpaste and you smear it, and you're smearing the toothpaste. So there are many big poskim that said you are allowed to brush your teeth on Shabbos. It seems like the accepted practice in the yeshiva world is not to brush your teeth on Shabbos because of the smearing of the toothpaste and of making the toothpaste wet. Then, of course, is the issue of bleeding. If somebody knows that their gums bleed when they brush their teeth, then they're for sure not allowed to brush their teeth on Shabbos. This is assuming that the gums don't bleed, right? So that's the basic halacha. However, there is a way to brush your teeth on Shabbos, and that even according to the more machmir shitas, is that if you don't make the toothbrush wet. If you don't make the toothbrush wet, then you could brush your teeth. Now, you might say, well, what's the point? So basically what you can do is you can take toothpaste and put it into water before Shabbos. A liquid toothpaste that they sell in the stores, and you put that into your mouth, or you could do with mouthwash. And then once the liquid's in your mouth, you take the dry toothbrush and you brush your teeth that way. That would be allowed. I can't say according to all opinions, but according to most opinions, that would be allowed. Again, what you do is you water down the toothpaste so it's no longer a paste. It can be even a thicker liquid. You put it into your mouth, take the dry toothbrush without making it wet, and then your mouth and brush your teeth that way. And that would be okay according to most poskim. However, once you take the toothbrush out, you cannot wash it unless you plan on using it again that Shabbos. The reason why you can't wash it is because that's the same reason that you're not allowed to wash dishes on Shabbos for after Shabbos, because it's preparing. So if you want to wash the toothpaste, let's say you're brushing your teeth Shabbos morning, and then you want to wash it when you finish brushing, so that's clean for when? For Motzei Shabbos. That's preparing for Motzei Shabbos. So therefore, you can brush your teeth that way, but you cannot wash the toothbrush then, because it's going to be preparation for weekday. If you're brushing your teeth Friday night and you plan on brushing them again Shabbos morning, that's not a problem. There's no the preparation is only from Shabbos to weekday. There's no problem preparing from Shabbos to Shabbos. Again, so let's just repeat with the toothbrushes. Most places, not most, but I would say in the yeshiva Hasidish world, they don't allow brushing teeth on Shabbos. Many others do allow it. If you want to do it, according to the opinions that say it's asur, is water down the toothpaste before Shabbos, or use mouthwash and put it into your mouth, and then then take the toothbrush and wipe it and brush it, and then you'll be okay. This is all assuming if you know that your teeth don't normally bleed, then your gums don't normally bleed. As far as flossing is allowed on Shabbos. That's not a problem unless you know your teeth are going to bleed. If you don't know your teeth are going to bleed, you have to know definitely that your teeth will bleed. If you're not sure if your teeth will bleed, then you can brush your teeth. You can use floss. Okay, I hope that's clear. So just to review what we discussed tonight. Basically, we discussed how to make proper coffee and tea, and how to properly serve soup where you can put spice that are into it. Basic rules you have to know is there's kli rishon. Kli rishon you're not allowed to put anything into, even when it's not on the fire, unless the item was already cooked. Then you are allowed to. Kli sheni, as a chumrah, we try not to put anything into. If it was pre-cooked, you could put it into there. If it was a pre-cooked liquid, even if it got cold, you could put it into there. and a kli shlishi you are allowed to put things into, but not anything that's easily cooked like tea and coffee. So therefore, if you want to do that, it's better to make tea essence. If you don't, then we said that the way you can make the tea is use a kli shlishi and then let it cool down, like by pouring it back and forth, or wait a few minutes and then you could use put in the tea bag. But when you take out the tea bag, because of butter, take it out with a spoon. So you take out a little bit of liquid, and then you have tradition soups. We said you could make just to be safe. Use a kli shlishi. If you could put in the spices, wait a few minutes till it cools off. And we said the pour over is allowed. Also wait for the water to cool off a little bit before making it, and it's not a butter issue. And then we just said the toothpaste, you shouldn't use toothpaste with a toothbrush. If you want, you can make the inside of the mouth wet with whatever you want, and then use a toothbrush. But then if you can't wash it, because it's considered preparing for the weekday, the Kosher Innovations toothbrush you can use, that's no problem. And you use it with the liquid. It's basically, I don't see why you need the Kosher Innovations toothbrush, because the way we said you can do it, that's essentially the way you're doing it with them too, because you're using it with their liquid toothpaste that they make. So you can do it with your own toothbrush too. But by the way, there are some people that say, some poskim that say that a toothbrush is muksa since it's not meant to be used on Shabbos. So they say if you're going to do this with the toothbrush, you should have a special toothbrush for Shabbos. It's a chumrah, but they're saying it's because of muksa, because it's considered a weekday activity since we don't normally use a toothbrush. Okay, that's a chumrah, but if you know that you're going to constantly brush your teeth on Shabbos, then it's not a problem because it's not going to be muksa. Can you use a Q-tip to clean your ears on Shabbos? If it's liquid there, then you can't. If you know that there's going to be liquid, if there's an ear infection or there's liquid in the ears, then you cannot. If it's just going to be ear wax, then I don't see why you can't use Q-tips. Okay, I see I went a little bit over time. Okay, everybody should have themselves a good tzvach and a good yar. And thank you for listening. We should hear only the B'Seder Stavus.